Welcome back to the Bruce Poinsette Show. We have a special guest in studio today, Joy Elise Davis, president of Imagine Black, or executive director, you
Look
know,
at
just
you.
just person out here killing it in the world. How are you doing today?
I'm doing okay today. I just talked to my mom. I haven't talked to her in a long time. I'm very fortunate to have AC during this heat wave. So yeah, I'm doing good. How are you?
Yeah, likewise, AC helps.
Yeah, it does.
It helps a lot. But yeah, I'm just doing good. Busy, off camera. We had a little talk about some of us might need to schedule some vacations out here.
Yes.
Actually, take some time because the work is good, but uh, sustaining
Yeah.
is helpful. But yeah, we've got a lot to talk about. But there's always a lot going on with Imagine Black. But we've got an event coming up, so we got to do the promo. Got to get into WWE mode here.
Do it.
So as some of you may know, on September 14th, as a part of Oregon Humanities Consider This event, we're talking about black political power in Oregon and what it means to build it, not just in our, I guess, respective silos, but, throughout the state. And I would say, like, you and Imagine Black really inspired. I'm hosting this, by the way. I should also mention that Joy Elise is going to be one of the guests. We also have Marcus LeGrand from the Ben Lapine School District, vice chair of the school board, and Keith. God, no. See, we need a vacation
I
because
got you.
names are good. I'm sorry, Keith, because we've talked multiple times.
Keith has a black last name. It's Jenkins.
Yes, Keith Jenkins from So Black in Southern Oregon. So it's going to be awesome. It's going to be like a, cross geographical discussion. And like I said, I was actually introduced to So Black from Imagine Black. Just, I forgot, you know, in the many events you do, but yeah, it put me on to that, put me on to kind of like some more stuff, just happening in Southern Oregon and inspired me to investigate. But yeah, can you just talk about why seeking out peers, doing this work in other parts of the region, knowing, just with like driving with, especially with like the pandemic now, we don't have even less opportunities to, link up in person necessarily,
Mm-hmm.
but why still, making those connections is so important considering the work you do.
Yeah. I'll go real personal and then go to the work. I think from a personal lens, this work is lonely at times. Not so much even thinking about the numbers. And I know folks always have a lot to say, like, oh, there's what, just shy of 90,000 black folks in the state. Um, that part I think is exciting to me. Like, that's a really achievable organizing goal. Like, we can reach 90,000 people. But in terms of like progressive black folks, there's not that many of us here that are outward about it. Some folks in this space are, playing politics or letting politics play them, so to speak, and
Mm-hmm.
having to downplay kind of their true stance and their issues. And it's nice to find like minded organizations or folks who are willing to be bold, who's willing to, draw a line in the sand and like, these are what I'm interested in. This is the issues that I'm passionate about. And this is the vision I have for the future. And I met Keith during Census 2020. We were working as an org, trying to count with a bunch of other great BIPOC organizations, counting, black and brown and indigenous folks across the state, and met Keith and was like a little bit obsessed with his background and how he got to Oregon and his way of being. And so I think I feel very fortunate to have kind of a local plug in that way that we can kind of compare notes and energize each other when we're stressed out about this work, and have community, which I think is like super important. And this is not me bashing black folks, but we know that, not all skin folks are kin folks, and how we navigate with folks, it's important. And I think it's nice to just know that you have somebody that got your back. And um, generally speaking, there's just not a lot of black organizations in the state that can do elections and political work. So it was cool to find one that was kind of aligned on some issues.
Yeah, now we're going to double back to that elections and political angle because that is very important. But what you said there, just about the loneliness of this work, just speaks to me. And it's, it's something that's kind of a theme with nonprofits in general, where, you might look and say, oh, this group has X amount of volunteers or however many people on the email list, but so often, it comes down to like it's a small few doing several jobs at once each, and it burns you out. It gets tiring, and it's, especially trying to do stuff in a place like Oregon, doing things like actually advocating fiercely for Black priorities. it it just is draining. So yeah, making those connections, and I don't know, sometimes even just giving yourself an excuse again in the more traveling times to be like, yeah, I'm gonna take a drive down I-5,
Yes.
link up with these other people, and
Yes.
enjoy the scenery of Oregon a little bit on the way to do it.
Yeah,
It's
it's
nice.
beautiful. This is a beautiful state. Yeah, it's lonely. I mean, something you just said about doing so many jobs, like blacks, but I'm like focusing on Black nonprofits, but there's so many Black folks operating without that like legal status, but are still doing so like amazing, amazing, amazing work. But we know just Black orgs nationally, we just don't get the same funding as everyone else. And then that number gets smaller when they're like organizing a progressive. I remember funders not that long ago in grant applications telling me we're not allowed to say the word organizing. Like we couldn't say that. We couldn't say like educational campaign or like nonpartisan. The word campaign
Wait,
triggered.
what? Why?
I know. Well, because the reality is folks get really nervous and fearful of Black liberation and even building the infrastructure to get close to it. And that same organization that, will not be named, they've gone through some work and now they let us say organizing in our applications. But it's hard when you're underfunded and you're tired and you are trying your best to dismantle a system that you also have to operate within. And like, I don't know what I love so much about Black people in general. And, you don't hear me always talk about Black people, but we can hold so many things, like we can both hold that like the system is BS and ridiculous while also holding the fact that we have to do certain things to move the work forward. And I think some folks will think that's a contradiction. And I think it speaks more to our genius and are able to navigate, to code switch, to keep our eye on the prize while also recognizing when something is just like far out wild and that we still have to figure out how to have those complicated conversations. But yeah, this work is lonely and it's stressful. And sometimes when we make bold stances, people get pissed off and then your number of kind of supporters gets smaller. And some people get upset about that. And for me, I get excited. I want to mess with the folks who are aligned with me. And I would much rather know up front than assuming that we're on the same page when we're not.
Absolutely. I mean, I feel like that's a great segue into politics specifically, and that one, I'm sure some people may not realize that Imagine Black is actually a 501c4, and people like 501c4, what does that mean? It sounds like, nonprofit mumbo jumbo, but just to clarify, you have 501c3s which cannot, endorse candidates. It's kind of, I know there's other things about it, but
That's the big one.
that really is the big one. So, Imagine Black in this most recent primaries put out its endorsements. It was, 19, 18 candidates
Yeah.
throughout the state of Oregon, many of whom, ended up winning their primaries. So, can you just talk about, again, like, why being able to, speak, like, explicitly kind of, like, weigh in politics, not just on issues, campaigns, but on candidates, is so important. Yeah, especially in a state like Oregon.
Yeah, I think it goes back to that, just around 90,000 Black people who live in Oregon. We deserve so much more than what we're given. We deserve better. And at a certain point, you hit a wall, I would say, within the current, like the popular 501c3 status, You're not allowed to lobby. You have to be mindful of how much you lobby, which means when you talk to legislators, you can only spend a certain percentage of your time on that. Like you're very much limited. And I think it speaks to the fact that like nonprofits were never designed to build power. They were never really designed for like liberation work. They were very much designed for white women to like have activities and funnel money through. But I think why political work is so important is that we need to be using all of the tools in our toolbox to get us closer to where we want to go. I don't think solely voting is enough. I don't think solely lobbying is enough. I think there's multiple strategies that you need to implement at the same time to get us closer. So for us, we believe that organizing, so that's not just, again, and there's no disrespect, not just holding an event, but actually trying to build power. And power that, you know, expands beyond just politics, power for folks to shape their environment. We talk a lot, I think, in spaces about like self-determination, but like for me, that means being able to like shape your environment, being able to live, I guess, in its very basic format. I think I was looking at some quote by Huey Newton talking about like racism, like not really wanting to focus on like the individual racism, like, okay, that person might be racist, but once they actually have the power to kill me because they're racist, like that is, and with no consequences, it's that power piece. And I believe that Black folks globally, but focusing on Oregon, like we deserve to have power. We deserve to be self-determined and decide what our environment looks like. And organizing is both like a science and an art, and it is a specialized skill to move folks to power. So we believe in organizing. We believe in leadership development. I think leaders are they need to be invested in, and I think we see it even federally. We see so many folks, and this is not an ageist thing, but we see a lot of elders holding positions of power, but not passing it on to the next level. Like we see this constantly locally, whether it's like churches all the way up to like legislator, like it's in all these spaces. And there's many reasons I can critique why that's happening. And it's most basic, they need to just pass that power along and chill, you know? But also we need to invest in the next generation. Like it's not gonna happen overnight. It takes investment, it takes time, it takes political education, learning about this craft, and not just in like an academic setting, but like actually the stories and the lived experiences and that histories that's not always taught in those spaces, but are taught in like nonprofits or taught in community groups. And then I think political power is alongside that. Like you need to have all three. You need to be able to go a step beyond just say, go out and vote. You need to actually tell people who's harming you. Politicians lie sometimes, most of the time, especially when they're up for elections. You know, they say what they need to say and their truth comes out when they're elected and they are actually like governing or making laws, so to speak. So I think it's important that when we do this work of politics, when we like are involved in it, that we create our own list of issues, our own list of demands, and we see if those candidates, how do they measure up to that list, so to speak. Our politicians are meant to be pushed. They're meant to be held accountable, but they're not supposed to hold all the power. And I think if we can build the community power necessary, these politicians are working for us and not the other way around. I'm ranting a lot, but yeah.
Oh, but to that point, with the especially with the endorsement process, I think one of the things I really appreciate about what Imagine Black does is actually have, you know, you make that list of things where you say, these are our priorities. Like, for example, you know, actually reimagining public safety, moving, you know, defunding the police. Like, and if people can't, you know, agree to that, they can't get the endorsement, or if they agree to it, then go back on it, there are consequences. Like, it's not just, you know, did you come to this meeting and make us feel good? Like, it's actually about the policies. And, you know, I think, like I said, it's something I really appreciate because, like you said, it's just got to go beyond. It's got to go further. Not to get into my own little rant, but
I like it.
but I see, you know, all these like first black this, first black that, and it's like great, it's a first step, but who are those people beholden to once they get in office? If it's the same white power structures, then we just get the same results, except, with this a face that I guess looks more like ours, and in some cases, they use it to be even more. What's a polite word I can use? More defiant about upholding the status quo. It's very weird, and I'll just say again, as a person who grew up in Lake Oswego, it's very personal, and anyone can read between the lines there. I'm trying to be nice. But anyways, we'll pull back from that for a second. Imagine Black also recently won an award, I believe the Medallion Award.
Yeah.
So what is the Medallion Award, and what is Imagine Black being recognized for?
Yeah, it's such an honor, and I know sometimes, like, everybody has their own personal feelings about awards. Like, either you love them or you hate them. But I think going back to that lonely piece, sometimes in the work that you're doing, it's hard to know if you're on the right path, if I'm quite honest. Like, the work that we do, you're with like-minded folks. You have tons of theory and research that supports it, but there's always a little bit of doubt, especially when you're pushing against the status quo, or folks that even you respect, somehow sometimes lose your respect, and you're like, I thought you were my people, and now I've learned that you've not, which I learned quite a bit in this job and interacting with politicians. Folks that I thought we were more aligned, it sometimes hurts when you find out that they're not. So there's this award from the Secretary of State, and essentially I believe they have them in every single state. The Secretary of State gets to nominate a few folks, and then it has to be approved kind of nationally. And it's usually around civic engagement. So getting folks involved in voting. And sometimes we think of civic engagement as just, we narrow the view, like, oh, it's participating, testifying only, or maybe it's showing up to a meeting. But voting is actually a part of that. It's getting folks involved. It's investing in folks to be self-determined, to speak for themselves without having to go through a nonprofit or go through somebody else to elevate it, quote unquote. So, we got this award. It's wild to me. It's exciting. It's also, it's just very, very, I feel very honored. And I think sometimes, and not just like, we know that even this moment was only possible because so many folks, even before I even got here, our C3 version, we've been around since 2009, and so many amazing folks have like put so much labor and effort and tears and like sweat, all the things into this space, and has watched it change, evolve, and grow or get small, like so many things, the life cycle of an org. And I think it's really just nice to have a small moment to celebrate those wins, to have a piece of paper that says that we've tried some things. But I think it's also important to recognize that there's just so much more work to do. But in this moment, I think just wanting to celebrate where how far we've come.
Oh, well, again, congratulations. Yeah. It's a big honor. And I think to another point about just the organization, and this point about getting more people in, and I think something that's really effective that I've seen is just being very intentional about, you say a lot like the Imagine Black language, recognizing Black people as experts in our own experiences, and more importantly, like treating us as experts in our own experience. So not just, obviously, again, in the nonprofit social justice world, there are plenty of requests of bring your Black self here to tell us your Blackie Black stories and educate us, and just come. Shouldn't you feel honored that we asked you to be here? But I feel like Imagine Black is really just great on this idea of like, no, we're going to invest. We're going to actually like compensate people for their own experiences, and that can look like different things. Sometimes that's, that is money. Sometimes that's just, even with like meetings, supporting things like, hey, we're going to give, these DoorDash gift cards, or Grubhub gift cards, so people can, have a snack while, we're discussing these issues and building with each other. So you just talk about like that, those little small, but like, I shouldn't call them small, but like those things that aren't as, they're not the big headline picture grabbing things, but they're really important to like keeping this building, this infrastructure and maintaining it.
Yeah. Thank you for saying that. And such a good, introduction. We 100% believe that Black people are experts, experts on so many different things. And when we ask them to come to the table and essentially consult and give us their thoughts and recommendations, it's from my perspective disrespectful not to compensate them for that time. And you're right, sometimes it does look like a Grubhub gift card. Grubhub, if you're listening, you could give us more Grubhub gift cards for free. But we put that in our budget. People need food. Like childcare. Childcare is a big part of it. I used to personally work as a consultant a lot for like community engagement events. And I would hear left and right that these government staffers would be like, oh, we don't know why, Black and brown folks aren't coming to our meeting that's, an afternoon with no food, no anything. And it's like, yo, put some in the budget, give them some food, make sure they have childcare. And something even with childcare that has evolved. I remember a time where it was like progressive to have a childcare person like in the meeting available. And then I remember talking to some parents and they're like, you know what? I don't know that person. Why am I going to send my child to a stranger doing a community meeting? Like, no, give me the money and I will pay for my own services to take care of my child. And whether it's paying a family member and a friend. And I think it comes down to it is understanding and being honest about the real barriers to this work. And we can't keep saying the word equity and we can't keep talking about these things in theory without putting them into practice. And when we do a focus group, we pay people to be there. When we are asking folks to go to a training, especially when it's last minute, we're like, oh, shoot, something is happening. We need you to show up next week. Like, no, we actually need to be mindful that some people have to take off work to be here, or they have to find care for their children or their family members or their elders, and may not have time to grab food on the way. So I just think the way we involve folks need to change. The way we think about being civically engaged, I think it's a privilege to be at a table without having to have all your needs met or having to be compensated for your time. And if we really want these tables to look more equitable, quote unquote, we actually have to put our budget, where our mouth is. And I think a budget is a moral document. And if we're not putting the money towards what we said we really want to achieve, then we're just lip service, so to speak.
Yeah, amen. I mean, you have these, like you said, like meeting people's needs and just asking that question as opposed to saying, oh, why does our space only seem to be conducive to retired white people? Like, I don't know, because in the middle of the day,
Right?
there's nothing else there. Like, just simple things like actually investing in this. I don't want to say what a novel idea, but really.
Right? I didn't think we would still be, not like debating this, but like trying to convince, gosh, try make gift cards. And even going a step beyond that, Lyft codes. Like, some people don't feel comfortable on transit right now. There's a lot of, I'm thinking about myself around, the white supremacists here are real and they are a threat. And sometimes I don't always want to get on the bus and have to size everyone up and determine if I'm safe. Sometimes they need to just give me a Lyft code and I can get there on my own time. And I know, as an environmental lover, I know that's not everybody's preferred method, but I think until we start thinking about safety in a different way, we have to actually make sure that folks are able to be there and that their needs are met.
Absolutely. And I know some people are going to be listening to this and saying, well, money doesn't just grow on trees, but, again, being in this nonprofit space, being in this social justice space, what I found, especially, again, as someone who grew up in Lake Oswego, still does stuff in Lake Oswego, in addition to the grants and, things you can apply for, there's so much money out here.
So much money.
Like, it is wild just going and, meeting people, going to these different events, and you're always being asked, like, what can I do? What can I do? Except for using all this expendable disposable income I have just readily at my disposal. People will be like, yeah, I'm going to drop 1,000 on this weird thing, but what can I do to help you besides give money? It's
Give the money.
it's really okay. I have some theories as to why, just weird anti-blackness of like trusting people
Oh,
with the
for
money.
sure.
But really, like,
Give the money. I mean, I've just talked to donors who want to restrict everything. They only want to fund something that they care about, or I've looked at some funny nonprofit blogs where we have to create a whole new program for a donor because they're giving a small, like little things like that. And I'm like, yo, just black folks, we know how to budget like crazy. Like low income people, folks who are most impacted, know how to budget. We know how to take care of ourselves. We also know what are the things our community needs. And yeah, there's enough money for it. There's so much money out there. Whether that money is actually flowing to black orgs, it's usually not. But there's enough out there that if folks need to just change their priorities and actually look at their own anti-blackness and realize that their restrictions and their need to have all these details are really rooted in anti-blackness. Like they don't care about that money. Give it away.
yeah, God, that's a word as far as just the need to control.
Oh my gosh.
And just what I found is it's not even like, there's a time in my life where I'd like to like piece these things together and be like, okay, what's the end goal? What's the more nefarious, or not even nefarious, but like what's the thing that like makes, even if I don't agree with it, at least makes sense. But like there's a lot of people just like from a reactionary standpoint where it's just like, no, I just need to feel control in this situation, and like that's it. And it's wild. Again, I would suggest getting some, working on that. But in the meantime, give the money. You could give the money. Like when people ask, what do we need? And they say, we need money. Listen.
Listen. Yeah, some of I have some white-led nonprofits that I even, groups that I'm in good community with. They tell me how they don't have to go through the same things we do. It makes me really deeply sad. And I even recognize my own privilege in navigating the nonprofit world. And I'm like, yo, you don't have to turn in a 3-page report and have people question you to the super, super detail. They're like, no, I ask for money and they give it to me. And it's weird. And no, it's not weird. It's anti-blackness. Let's call it what it is, that we have to do things that others don't.
And what you said about just like the restrictions, like even just also give the money, but also, yeah, while we're on the subject, expand. There are needs that communities have that don't necessarily, I guess, also require the educating of white people, because it feels like a lot of the money, been just a few more recent conversations about this around like art shows and how so many black art shows that are getting the funding, like it has to be around, for lack of better terms, depressing things. And we had not to get off subject, but we're doing a topic earlier where I was actually like in defense of the Till movie and the whole thing, like we can have all the black stories. So I don't want to just like knock people who talk about the things that are rough, but it does say something when that's the only thing that's getting the funding, or the only types of things we can get grants for, things that also have a component of educating white people or serving white people. Like some of the stuff we need, we talk about that loneliness factor, just community. Like space to actually not even just develop policy, but literally build community. Even when it comes to policy, space to not just have a deliverable attached to it, but actually like, can we have some space to work through some of these thoughts and work through some of these experiences and work through some of this, if we know this history, if everyone's, people are aware that gentrification has happened now, okay, so you're understanding that there are like psychological effects, there's all this community division, so we're just supposed to like magically have a meeting and fix that? No.
It's not how it works. Healing, I mean, I don't think we've wrestled with as a society the trauma that I know all of us are going through in this moment, but particularly Black people. Like, it's just, it keeps piling on. And we need space to heal. And also, some of us heal through happiness and joy. Like, can we laugh a little bit? Like, can we have a space to just kick it and be with our own?
Yeah.
Oh, yes. No, you're fine. I was like, do you need me? Oh, can we be happy? Like, can we dance? We try at, and I also, sidebar, but I think sometimes we forget as funders forget, and I'm speaking to y'all funders and donors, is that sometimes we want to organize ourselves around like a positive vision. And what we try to do that at the nonprofit too. Like, when you want, this work is for the long haul. It is hard. It is like stressful. It is lonely. You are constantly experiencing like triggers and trauma. It's hard going to the state legislature and trying to push something and having them say racist things to your face, and you actually not that you don't know how to respond, but you're so in shock. It hurt, like, and then it's a big letdown when they pretend to do something and they don't do. Like, it's so traumatic, especially when you have either previously or currently experiencing that oppression that they are just unwilling to move and to even recognize. Can we just have some spaces where we can dream about something different? That energizes us. That's the visionary work. Can we think about that Black people will exist in the future, and what would that look like for us? Like, I like to organize around vision. I do think there is a time and a place where we have to like respond back to harm, and recognizing that a moment of pain can sometimes fuel folks to do like immediate action. Like, I get that part, but the long haul work is actually remembering that there's a better way to do this. There's a better way to fund Black nonprofits than we do now. There's a better way to do nonprofit work at all. Like, that could be completely transformed. There's a better way to, ride transit and be safe. There's just a better way to be Black in this world. And I know I will never get to experience probably the things that especially this generation is fighting for. Like, we might not ever get to see it in our lifetime, but that doesn't mean we still can't hold on to that larger vision that it's going to happen. And it's not to be like ignorant to like, oh, I'm just going to look to the future, but it's actually to fuel us, to keep us going and remembering that there's going to be a time after this,
Right. And I mean, it's just one, it's a legacy of, there's people who built the foundations for, what we're trying to do today, who took a very similar approach, saying, I may not see the fruits of all this labor, and it's not just for the sake of martyrdom or whatever. It's actually for the sake of, let's build something better. Let's build what will actually serve us. And yeah, it's it's just nice. I enjoy talking with you just because, again, this idea of actually imagining more, not just having this, so many of the same conversations. Again, you know it's even better than I do, just going into these rooms and going through the same song and dance.
They want us to dance for it. I also love conversations with you. It's nice to talk to your people. Like, yeah. And I'm sure there's things, and gosh, I'll go on a rant on like when Black folks disagree on things and how we move through conflict. But I enjoy kind of these conversations because I think we don't get a chance to do them very often.
Yeah. Even that though, like when we talk about disagreeing and the thing that's always interesting to me is like when those disagreements arise, or I shouldn't say arise, but like when they, blow up in certain spaces, like who's dictating that? Like who's dictating the divisions? Are we arguing with each other organically? Or are we arguing with each other on behalf of these bigger white structures? Are we being separated? There's like the political left, but then there's also like Black people within this space, and like, are we being divided not even on behalf of ourselves? I'd say the answer is oftentimes yes, but that's the whole other thing.
Agreed.
But like, just again, even creating space for that and creating space to exercise through it. You know, it's just so, God, conflict resolution. Again, another novel idea, I know.
Right. You know, I used to think conflict, and no disrespect, I know folks who like study that, and I thought it was a joke. I was like, okay, what a thing. And then, you know, I saw up close, we actually as a people, and not just black people as a society, but like, let's look at black people. We actually have not had the tools to know how to move through conflict well. Like, gosh, in our family lives, and so many, we just don't have those conversations. And um, part of my own abolitionist practice, and I'm like a new baby abolitionist in the sense that like I'm learning, and I think it's, you know, it's a lifelong work, but thinking about how do you move through conflict and what accountability looks like for others and for yourself. How do you recognize that um, that sometimes shifting your relationship with a person doesn't mean you cancel them. You know, like sometimes you're my homie and I realize that you caused harm and you're not my homie anymore. You're something else to me. I'm not canceling you. I actually do realize that we have conflict to work through. We can't work through it in the way that we're in relationship to each other now. Um, I think there's so much around conflict, accountability. Even in this moment, I know everyone is like buzzwording transformative justice and restorative justice. I just hope in this moment we spend some time like studying and learning more about. Some folks have been like dreaming and theorizing and practicing around those topics for decades, for years and years. And I think the way we move through conflict, we need to figure out how that changes. Or I think we're going to end up in the same situation where it's, you know, we have a conflict, we don't even remember what it's about, and it's years and years, and now this org hates this org, or this family hates this person, and we actually might not realize that there's a way to hold each other accountable in a rigorous way that still leads us to, I don't know, a place that's not causing more harm, I guess. It's a rant, but yeah.
Oh, but it's necessary. It's absolutely necessary. So, you know, to any potential donors, funders watching for whether it be Imagine Black or any, you know, people doing black work, think about all the things we have just talked about and notice how none of those were teaching bias 101 to, you know, your white membership. I'm just going to throw that out there.
Throw it out.
There are things you could support that could actually be meaningful specifically to black people, and it would actually be helpful, and you could feel better about yourselves too. Everyone wins.
Everybody wins.
Just throwing that out. Which also, to plug Imagine Black things, this might be a good time to talk about the membership and accomplices model, because it is an interesting kind of novel way of, you know, membership support for the organization. How does that work?
Yeah, should I keep going? It's different in the sense that, so I'll back up. Members in general, I always have a weird pit in my stomach, and again, I'm not trying to be disrespectful to some folks, when they have a group that they're representing in a space, but they actually are not connected to them. You know, they're not listening to them, they're not building community, they're not checking in, they're not holding, who am I beholden to? Who's holding me accountable in these spaces? And what we realized, when I joined the org like 5 years ago, is that we actually didn't have this body, if I'm honest. We were like, we're not doing this work, and we need to figure out how to do it. And I wish more folks would be honest about our shortcomings and not let that stop us from like changing some things up. So we developed this membership program. We went through so many names, like what do we call it? Because, you know, we like a good branding and we like some art and stuff. And we landed on Kinfolk. We had another name that was not a great name, but a staff member was like, let's do Kinfolk. And it's really for black folks who are like-minded to come together and help influence, you know, help us shape our elections. Like when we endorse candidates, we ask folks to weigh in about like, is this person for you? Like, what have you experienced with them? Are their words resonating with you? We asked them to help lead on campaigns, to help us decide what questions to ask candidates, like we did during this last primary session, election season. And then we developed a counter kind of space called the Accomplice Sustainers. Um, and we went back and forth with it, if I'm honest. As a black led and a black serving org, we don't like to center people who are not black, just to be real. Like, the only exception is that, I try in my personal practice to center black and indigenous folks. And partly, too, is because I know black people are indigenous to something. We are the original people. So, like, to me, it's like I see my kin as indigenous folks as well, who are, indigenous to this land here in the U.S. Um, but we were thinking, like, how do we actually get those non-black folks who want to do more than just be an ally? And at the time, we were so over the ally word and branding. It was a way to absolve yourself from actually doing some work at times. Like, oh, I went to a training, pat on my back, I've ended racism now. Like, it's that type of energy. Or like, I cried, I realized racism exists, and now I'm stuck in this moment. We're like, no, like, there's actually work to do. We may not be the org that is going to help you untangle or recognize your own anti-blackness. That is some other org's work. Kudos to them. They are doing it. We want them afterwards. Like, now that you've cried, now that you've gone through, you read, your one book on racism or your 2 books or your 3 books, now what? And we're like, okay, we want to be a space for the now what. So we ask folks to join us as an accomplice, to go a step beyond an ally, to donate with us, to sustain the organization, to help us fundraise, to, show up when we need you to show up. Because, there's around 90,000 black folks in the state, which means there are times we need our folks to join us in the fight. Like, we need them to put pressure on legislators who are not interested in listening. We need them to help replace legislators who refuse to listen or are not willing to be pushed. We need folks to send those letters, to door knock, to protest, to be with us and not center themselves. And it's hard, I'm not going to lie, and I don't think we get it perfect all the time. And I think we're dedicated, though, to, like, being better and not centering them, while also asking them and demanding, actually, that they join us in this way, behind us, but they join us in this fight.
Yeah. So this is going to be dropping the first week of September. So, yeah, I know Imagine Black has a lot of things in the pipeline, but is there anything as far as coming up this fall that you'd like to put on people's radars, so they can anticipate, join?
I love a good plug. So I think the first was already mentioned. September 14th? I'm very excited for this conversation. It's nice to be, with my people, or folks that I think, I don't know everybody, but people I think are my people, as we kind of talk about this space and hopefully agitate each other a little bit about dreaming a little bit bigger. So I'm, like, excited for the dialogue. We are actually, by the time this airs, we're actually bringing in someone on September 22nd, which I'm very excited about, and actually having some fangirl moments. Robin D.G. Kelly wrote this amazing book called Freedom Dreams, and it's the 20th anniversary. He's coming to town, and we grabbed him for some things, as well as this amazing poet and organizer who wrote the forward is going to be there as well. So we're having a space to do some political education and learning around a black radical imagination. Like, what do we need to sustain us? What are the visions for the future? What this book that I think has influenced me and so many organizers and comrades of mine. It's just going to be a moment to kind of be in that space. So that's going to be actually in the building, Portland Art Museum, on September 22nd. And then my last plug is a little bit later in the year, but the elections, like November is a big deal. And I think for those who lean more progressive or liberal or whatever language, you don't consider yourself a conservative, I think we sometimes take for granted that, and we think Oregon is just this, like, bubble of liberal values. And, like, I would say there's a lot of, neoliberal values in this space, but there's also a lot of conservative folks. And like what's happening on the federal level, they are coming for people in this moment. They are coming for the governor's race. Like, the governor's race is actually a hot race, and I'm actually like, we got to double down on it, because I'm nervous, if I'm quite honest. And then also, I would say, leading up to the school board races, there's a lot of folks putting a lot of efforts in trying to push back on teaching our youth about the true the realities of this world and lying to them. And whether it's like critical race theory or anything else, they're spewing lies their way. I think that we have an opportunity to make sure that this next generation is, growing up with all the facts and the truth. And whether or not, school board races are one of those races folks don't really get excited about, but it's so important. And same with our governor's race. So I hope y'all register to vote, and I hope you're ready to, put some work in this November, because I think it's going to take all of us to hold the line, so to speak.
Absolutely. I just want to double down on that because, yeah, especially when you brought up school board and whether it be critical race theory, whether it be, well, not even critical race theory, because that's not what these people are fighting against in the schools. They're literally just fighting. You are acknowledging, like, black and brown people, like, you're acknowledging history. How dare you?
How dare you?
Or, oh, you are recognizing that, trans children exist. How dare you?
Exist.
You think that having cops in schools is not a good thing. How dare you?
Whew.
I'm not saying that's a very personal LO fight I'm having right now, but LO school board, stop. Just stop. Anyways, yeah, like, it's just, I know, especially with, like, midterms, like you said, like, we take these things for granted. We're not paying attention. It's not the big, sexy general election, but it's so important. And the people, our opposition in these cases, they are organized. They take this very seriously.
They do.
At all these different levels. And
that's how they maintain power.
Exactly.
Like, I know there's a lot of folks, especially in the black community, I'm sorry to cut you off, who have been harmed by the government. I mean, I would say most of all of us have been harmed by the government, and sometimes feel like voting is just a waste of our time. It doesn't matter anyway. But I can tell you for a fact, this governor race, for example, for a lot of people, it's going to be the difference of how they are fed, how they're housed, how they have their needs met. These positions hold a lot of power, and it may not be the most liberatory spaces we can make them in this moment, but it is gonna, our voting choices do actually impact a lot of vulnerable people, and it is a privilege to say that it doesn't matter. It actually matters to a lot of people. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't have said better myself. Yeah, Joy Alise Davis, Executive Director of Imagine Black. Thank you again.
Thank you.